Today we're going to take a little break from species counterpoint and begin looking at some basic jazz theory. Looking at a lead sheet in jazz is an entirely different experience from looking at a Beethoven symphony. In some ways it looks simpler, but in other ways it's much more confusing. The Beethoven symphony score tells every performer in the orchestra what notes to play and when to play them, but a lead sheet is so sparse it seems rather inadequate to create a decent performance. So perhaps a better comparison to playing jazz from a lead sheet is the process of realizing a figured bass during the Baroque period. In reading a figured bass, the score presents the bass line and includes figures which imply the harmony. The performer then improvises an appropriate backing for the rest of the ensemble. In jazz, the lead sheet provides the melody, with figures that imply a possible bass line and harmony. In figured bass, however, it is only the continuo player, usually that harpsichord player, that's improvising their part, but everybody else is more or less recreating the score as notated. In jazz, the bass lines, the harmonies, even the melodies are fair game for improvisation. Jazz, of course, developed here in the United States, and the individual freedoms that are offered to jazz performers directly parallels the ideals of the United States. You are free to do what you want, as long as it doesn't interfere with my ability to do what I want, and vice versa. Now, there are several fundamental harmonic paradigms with which we need to familiarize ourselves. In classical tonal harmony, the two most important harmonies are the tonic and the dominant, Roman numerals 1 and 5. In a major key, both 1 and 5 are major triads. There's only one additional diatonic major triad in a major key, and that's the 4 chord, the subdominant chord. Now, the beauty of these three chords, the 1, 4, and 5 chord, is that every scale degree belongs to at least one of these basic triads. Scale degree 1, for instance, belongs to the 1 chord and to the 4 chord. Scale degree 2 goes with the 5. Scale degree 3, 1. Scale degree 4 goes to the 4 chord. Scale degree 5 belongs both to the 1 chord and to the 5 chord. Scale degree 6 is in the 4 chord. And scale degree 7 is part of the 5 chord. Now, since authentic cadences move from 5 to 1, we need to place that 4 chord somewhere in the harmonic syntax. The typical phrase model in classical harmony is tonic to predominant to dominant to tonic. The opening tonic establishes home, and that dominant, that 5 chord, is the chord of tension. It's got the leading tone in it, and so the final tonic provides resolution by returning home. So what is a predominant? Well, it's the harmonic function that naturally precedes the dominant, obviously. Now, there are several chords that can serve in this harmonic function, but for now, we're going to limit our consideration to the 4 chord, the subdominant. So a natural harmonic progression might flow from tonic this way: tonic, predominant, dominant, tonic, or 1, 4, 5, 1. By elaborating or prolonging the opening tonic, we can help establish it as home. Think back to the good old days when you could actually leave the house. You might be heading out to class or to work, and maybe you make it all the way to the sidewalk, and suddenly you forgot something. So you got to go back into the house. You got to start the whole process of heading out again, but hopefully with greater success. So think of the sidewalk as the predominant. Now, the first time you made it to the sidewalk, you didn't go anywhere. You didn't use the sidewalk to its full potential to walk down the street. So likewise, we might prolong the opening tonic by going from 1 to 4, but instead of moving to 5, we go back to 1 first. Now later, we can do the 4 again and properly head to the 5. Take Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, for example. The melody begins. There's our 1. We go to 4. We'll go right back to 1. We've prolonged 1. That's the tonic. Then we go to our predominant 4. Then to our dominant function. Back home to 1. So the first 4 chord it was just elaborating our tonic. Now these 3 chords are very flexible and commonplace, the 1, the 4, and the 5 chords. But there's not a lot of variety in harmonic color. All 3 of those triads are major. So to help diversify this limited color palette, we often incorporate a chordal 7th onto the dominant. The 5/7's way more unstable than just its triadic base, so it provides a desirable tension to that plainness of those 3 major quality triads. Now there is another predominant chord, and it's a very common harmonic substitution for that major 4 chord, and it's the minor 2 chord. The minor 2 chord. The addition of a minor quality triad into the mix, it's wonderfully refreshing. So instead of the cadential formula going from 4, 5, 1, we now can use the 2 chord, a minor 2 going to 5, back to 1. Let me do that to Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. Here's our 4 chord, back to 1. Now here's a 2 chord, and then our dominant. So the 2-5-1 progression is the first harmonic progression we want to learn in jazz. The 2-5-1 progression, it's so ubiquitous. There are dozens of pieces that this is all you really need to know. So let's break it down. In the key of C major, the 2 chord is built off of scale degree 2. The 5 chord is built off of scale degree 5, and the 1 off of scale degree 1. The triads being D minor, G major, and C major. Where classical harmony typically restricts itself to only the dominant 7th, in jazz we can stick 7ths on almost everything. So the 2 chord goes from being just a minor triad to a minor 7th. The 5 is the dominant 7th, the major minor 7th, and the major 1 chord turns into a major 7th. So notice we just created a wonderful variety of harmonic colors. Instead of 3 triads of the same quality, like 1, 4, and 5, we have 3 functions, each possessing a unique harmonic quality. So for now, I want you to associate all minor 7th chords as a Roman numeral 2, all major minor 7ths as a Roman numeral 5, and all major 7ths as a Roman numeral 1. Now this is a gross oversimplification, but it'll at least get us started. It'll get us to the sidewalk, maybe even a couple of blocks down the street. So let's look at the chords in the first 4 measures of this Miles Davis tune. It's called Tune Up. All right, it begins with an E minor 7. So let's label that as a 2 minor 7. Next we have an A7, we'll call that a 5-7, and the last chord is a D major 7. That gets the label of a 1-7. Notice I didn't refer to the key signature in my Roman numeral analysis. I only looked at the quality of the chords indicated. Now, just because we labeled it, the minor 7 as a 2 and the major minor as a 5 and the major 7 as a 1, doesn't mean they actually share this relationship with one another. We need to confirm that the harmonic functions agree in our analysis. So we're going to start at the end of the progression on that tonic D. Well, in D major, what's the dominant? Well, it gets us up to A, doesn't it? So the dominant of D is A. Well, terrific. That's exactly what we have in measure 2. Well, what's scale degree 2 of D? Well, D-E. Okay, so E minor 7. So in these first 4 measures, the harmonic scheme is 2-5-1 in D major. Well, how about the next 4 measures, measures 5 through 8? Well, I see 3 chords. The first is a minor 7th, followed by a major minor 7th, ending with a major 7th. Well, that's the formula for a 2-5-1, isn't it? But is it truly? Is the relationship truly 2-5-1? Ignore the key signature and ignore the previous phrase for now. Look at the implied tonic in measure 7. That's the C. Well, if C is the tonic, G is the dominant, and D is the supertonic, or 2. So again, measures 5 through 8 create that same harmonic relationship of 2-5-1. So do you notice that in measures 1 through 8, we have 2 instances of a 2-5-1. The first 4 measures center around D, and measures 5 through 8 center around C. Instead of using that classical phrase model where we establish a tonic, depart it, and ultimately return to it, here we begin with uncertainty. We begin with this chord. So we're beginning on a predominant in measure 1. This creates harmonic tension because there's a delightful sense of ambiguity by delaying the revelation of the tonic until the end of that phrase. Then in measure 5, we begin this process again, but from a completely new starting point. The D chord in measures 3 and 4 is a tonic, but the D chord in measure 5 transforms into a minor 7th, and that disrupts the stability that we just created. As the phrase is unfolding, retroactively, we realize it was a 2 chord there in measure 5. All right. The third phrase, measures 9 through 12, it repeats the same process. The C major 7 tonic that we had in measure 7 and 8 becomes a minor 7, so we'll label that as a 2 minor 7. It's followed by an F dominant 7th resolving to a B flat major 7. And that's the tonic. So these 3 phrases all incorporate a 2-5-1 progression. First in D, then in C, and now in B flat major. Now each phrase harmonically sequences down a whole step. We went from D to C and then B flat. Those were the goals. The final 4 measures of this 16 measure tune, we're trying to create a sense of harmonic resolution. So we don't do the sequence anymore. We go back where we came from at the beginning. So here in measure, 13? Measure 13, we have the same E minor 7 that we started with in measure 1. That was a 2 chord, right? Yeah. So we have the 2 chord. As expected, this leads to the A7. And that's the dominant 7th. Well, in the first 4 measures, it sounds like this. Well, what do we expect here in the end? Well, we expect in measures 13 and 14, since we're restating this formula, it should naturally resolve to a D major 7 in measure 15. It would sound like this. That seems like a natural resolution, but that's not what happens. Instead, Miles is subverting that expectation. He resolves unexpectedly to a B flat major 7. That's not where it was supposed to resolve to. If we're truly listening to harmonic functionality, and that's expected of us, we should be pleasantly astonished at this final harmonic revelation. In classical cadential terminology, we would call that a deceptive cadence. But instead of resolving to a 1 from 5, we end up somewhere else. Completely unexpected. Now, it's unfortunate how quickly our senses become desensitized to this kind of musical drama. This type of analysis is a wonderful way to reinvigorate our dulled senses. Okay, in review. In jazz, we want to look for 2-5-1 progressions in different keys. Each chord of the progression possesses a different harmonic quality. The 2 minor 7 is a minor minor 7 chord. The 5-7 is a major minor 7, and the 1-7 is a major major 7. After identifying the qualities and their likely harmonic function by Roman numerals, it's crucial that we verify these relationships by first looking at the final tonic, then determining if the preceding chords agree with this tonic. Okay, there's a homework assignment available on Blackboard, and it's to take this lead sheet of Errol Garner's Misty and hunt for 2-5-1 progressions in different keys. First, you're going to label all the minor 7s as a 2 minor 7, all the major minor 7s as a 5-7, and all of the major major 7s as a 1-7. You then need to bracket off these 2-5-1 progressions so that they look like a group. Then I want you to look at the tonic of each group, that final chord of the set of 3, and compare the preceding chords back to it. So are the 2 5s resolving to their tonic correctly? If yes, mark it with a check. If not, give it an X. So the chord in measure 1 is establishing the tonic of the piece, E flat, and I've told you to ignore the C minor 7s in measures 5 and 21. But everything else should follow the process flawlessly. All right, best of luck. Thanks.